I'm a security guard hired to protect an estate. The Forest Has Eyes, Part 6, by The Forest Has Eyes. You know the saying, 2 steps forward, 5 steps back. Half a step forward, a kick in the gut sending us 10 feet back. That's our situation right now. At least that's the way that I would explain it. Things finally happened and, well, the computer's screen just glitches out. I don't know if that's a coincidence or something else. Anyway, let's get on with my story. To start off, remember the flickering lights and the slight power dips from last time? Well, it's started to be routine nowadays. A light bulb here, a flickering of one of the monitors there, and then it started to get worse. The front room TV would zap off. A bedroom clock would go out, but only the bedroom clock would reset. It started getting so bad that even Isaac got tired of it. Stupid billion-dollar piece of... He goes on like that every time he stomps down the stairs, only to see that the generator is still in top condition and running perfectly. He notes a few things, like he feels like he's being watched. Like the faces of the concrete keep looking at him funnily, and he swears that he sees the walls in different materials each time he walks up and down the stairs. Honestly, he needs to stop his drinking habit, although maybe not everything was due to his liquor. Early today, I was checking out the engine block in the security room, the one from the ATV. Isaac was muttering to himself or something, and the white noise of all of the cameras and monitors graced my ears as I continued to work, trying to scrape the black gunk off of the metal. I was doing well, even had a few samples, and then the power went out. You know that feeling of dread, the sudden, oh crap moment. It started to form as I saw the monitors one by one start to go a bit haywire. Then all of the noise and the lights cut out, and I was left in a void of darkness, sitting at the desk, my inspection tools in hand. My eyes darted about, trying to adjust to the darkness, as I suddenly panicked from a noise in the corner that I then learned was just Isaac hurrying out of his tent. "See, man, I told you," Isaac said as he stumbled out of the canvas and light fabric teepee. Honestly, at this point, he just needs to move into one of the rooms, but I can't blame him though. This place has an aura. Regardless, I grabbed the rifle on the side of my desk, the automatic one. The one that I said I would only use in case of a home invasion. As I taped a flashlight onto it, I could hear Isaac shuffling through his bag, grabbing an old weathered 5-shot. All right, let's go see if there's ghost. There were a number of things wrong with that sentence. I almost chummed it up to the alcohol on his breath. Bud Light. You can't shoot ghost, I muttered to him as I carefully opened the door and checked the hallway. And put on some pants. Come on, man. Isaac then put on a coat. I tell you, this man is going to get me killed. We both moved out, quickly checking some of the ground floor rooms. I took the lead. Isaac kept my back covered. Nothing. Not a thing. The front door was still locked. Everything in the living room was in one piece. I gazed up at the tall ceiling of the main room. "John, you there?" John answered by shining a flashlight off the banister. "Did the power go out?" he asked. It was then that Isaac pulled open one of the heavy curtains, and a bright wave of light shined through the windows. "Well, not all of it, apparently," he said. The exterior wall lights were still on, and the loud sound of the generator was chugging on strong. It was a bit of a contingency that Theodore and I had set up. In case of a power surge, with all things considered, we lined up pretty well with the situation, and we decided to install a generator to cover the outer lights. "What happened?" John asked from the floor above. "I don't know, a blackout. Maybe some crazy truck driver ran into a power line or something," Isaac suggested as he peeked out, half leaning back and forth, looking around, trying to see anything out the window. I walked over to the window and peeked out myself. It could be. No, it can't be. I pointed to a far-off light, shining just through the tops of the trees. The town's lights are still on. Well, ghost must have knocked out the power, Isaac said as he burped into his hand and spun the cylinder of his revolver. "John, stay in your room. We're gonna go ghost busting." "We're gonna have to work fast," I said. The surge generator will only keep the outside electricity on for a few hours. Like the guys outside are afraid of the electric anyway. We haven't seen one of them for weeks, remember? Isaac's attempt at group reassurance was met with the slight flickering of one of the floodlights. Only slight. And then there was laughing. Giggling, chuckles, and the inhuman voices that came from far off in the dark forest. They sounded like you took an old man's laugh and you pitched it down way too low. Whatever was out there knew our situation, somehow, and knew that we were a thread away from losing our safety net. And inside the house, silence only filled the void between us before I stated assertively, "John, go back to your room." I believe a while ago I talked about what was truly scary and creepy, most notably in the woods. Like I said, it isn't the obvious, it's the out of place. Take darkness, for instance. It's not the actual black void that you stare into that gets under your skin. No, it's what lies behind, or at least what you think lies behind. So when Isaac and I stood at the top of the staircase, gazing down, my rifle's flashlight only just barely illuminating the brick wall, you can imagine the atmosphere. "We're gonna die," Isaac said as I took the lead, stepping down a few steps, rifle shouldered. "We're gonna die, and it's gonna possess us." Maybe it was his liquid courage failing him. Nevertheless, Isaac closed the door behind us as I heard him pull the hammer back on his piece. Well, it has to do the latter in order to accomplish the former, right? I asked in some sort of attempt to lighten the mood. The truth is, the flashlight did nothing. Like actually nothing. Sure, it gave off some light, but a small beam on a stairwell this dark, trying to light up a room with a laser light, all I saw as we both carefully stepped down and moved step by step was the rough concrete wall at the bottom. I went over the layout in my mind. Hit the divider wall, then turn right and head to the generator. That's right, turn right and get to the generator. As Isaac and I reached the bottom of the stairs, my boots hitting the wooden planks at the bottom, I huffed out, "All right, let's get going," right before my face slammed into a brick wall. I stumbled back into what I remember was a bookcase. A bookcase. And then I remembered that the basement didn't have floors furnished with wood. Isaac looked around. I'm guessing his eyes adjusted to the darkness and he could see. He said, "Okay, I'm buzzed, but even I know something's off." And indeed it was. What was supposed to be a basement was now a library. My nose aching, I lifted my rifle and pointed the light around. Strangely, the flashlight worked now the way you would expect, illuminating while giving off peripheral light. But what we saw wasn't the basement that we knew. It was the library. Lines of shelves filled a large rectangular area, and whether it was the dust in the air or something else, sound seemed almost muffled. Isaac broke the silence. "What is going on?" It gave me some relief knowing that he hadn't vanished or anything. Spotting a doorway on the other end of the library, I knew there was only one thing that we could do: press on. Part of me wondered what would greet us on the other side of the library door. A black void, the same room 1,000 times over, horrific ghouls, all kinds of variables that your mind throws together. Instead, we were greeted by a small, turn-of-the-century kitchen. There was an old black stove, racks hanging from the ceiling, a wooden table with what seemed to be a butcher's knife sticking out of it. It wasn't a dream, it was real. As crazy as all this seemed, we were living it. As we made our way around the table towards what I could see was a door across the room, Isaac hurriedly pressed into me his left hand, his free hand grabbing onto my collar. I paused. "What's up?" I asked. Isaac responded by looking around behind us in the strange, disconnected head movements that drunk people usually make. He kept his pistol pointed outwards behind us as he leaned in to talk to me. "There's something behind us, man." The hairs on my neck stood up as I gazed around behind us. There was not a thing in this medieval kitchen besides us. Well, I thought for a moment, coming up with the words. "We better move forward then," I said. And with that, I walked through the strange kitchen, Isaac following, his hand still gripping the shirt on my shoulder. As we both neared the door, I poked the barrel of my rifle in, with a flashlight attached. It almost seemed like it went through a curtain. You couldn't see any light on the other side. Retracting my barrel, I took a leap of faith and poked my head in, to see that we were in, of all things, a tent. What the was all I could mutter as I stepped through. Honestly, it was a tent. Isaac passed through with me. I could see through his haze, even he was weirded out by the scene. It was a small rectangular tent of sorts, about 10 meters long and 6 meters across at each end. 6 bunk beds lie across the long sides of the tent. They were accompanied by 6 metal chests. In between the space of each bunk, there was a window, a plastic one, square and smeared with dirt. And the kicker was, there was no door at the other end of the tent. I looked around. The tent was unnaturally uniformed and sealed to the floor. Well, we better double back, I said. Chief, Isaac said. I turned to see Isaac now staring at a flat tent wall. That's a no-go. I walked up to the tent wall and pressed my hand up to it. Nothing. I even took my rifle and struck and bashed the wall. The tent fabric must have been made of starch because it only moved a couple of millimeters. I'll just cut our way out, I said, defiant to all of this. I took out my knife. It was traditionally made for skinning and other outdoor activities, but I think its creators would give me a pass on this one. As I shoved my knife through, Isaac started to gaze around the tent. A few seconds later, he asked, "Hey, what's up with that mask?" I turned my head, and I'll admit, a chill went up my back. The third bunk, the one in the middle on my left, had, at the time, what I thought was a haunted snowman mask. It must have been some sick joke. White skin, eyes were like beads of black coal, and of course, jagged teeth, a la a creepy Frosty the Snowman. Or something. The more I looked at it, the more I got a kick out of it. I even laughed. Well, I guess somebody's ready for Halloween, I said. I turned back to cutting through the tent wall, only to see that the gap I had cut through was now sealed and my knife lay on the floor. Okay, so you want to play like that, huh? Fine, I said, once again stabbing my sharpened metal through the fabric. I started to cut upwards, hoping to carve out a small doorway in which I could exit from. But then I noticed something creeping through the crack. Water. Cold, melted water. A breeze of blistery, stale air. And snowflakes. I did not know what was happening. When we descended those stairs into the basement, the air was still cool, and the leaves had yet to fall out of the trees. What I saw outside, I don't know where this tent was. It might as well have been out in Canada, but the snow was nearly a meter high, and it surrounded the tent like a flood. Man, what's going on? I said. I was cut off as Isaac chimed in, apparently looking through one of the smeared windows. Man, that's a lot of snow. Isaac more or less summed up my observations. I backed off from the crack, retracting my knife, and I turned around to him. How did this tent get all the way out here? How'd they set it up in all of the snow? Isaac didn't answer. He simply stared around, his head bobbing in a half-alcohol gaze. Hey, Dwight, he asked. Yeah, I answered. He gazed back at me, his eyes squinted as he asked, This tent, it looks a lot more beat up than it did a minute ago. What do you mean? I said as I pried my eyes from him and looked around. The light had dropped about 7 hours into night. As all of the light nearly vanished, moonlight shone through the much cleaned, but also much more damaged, plastic tent windows and the various holes in the previously intact tent surface. I shone my rifle's light around and took in the change. This couldn't possibly get any more weird, I muttered, and I guess I must have jinxed us. Dwight, Isaac said as I turned back to him. He simply pointed to my left. My eyes followed, slowly moving like a choppy stop-motion picture as I gazed over. A large beam of moonlight showed through a space inside the third bunk. in which laid a hole where the snowman mask I had stared at earlier seemingly hung. It wasn't until my mind slowly pieced it together bit by bit that dread started to sink in. Then, through the broken moonlight of the plastic window just to my right, I could see a shadow cross right across. I quickly hurried to my feet. Isaac aimed his pistol dead in front of him. I shouldered my rifle and did the same. Seeing we had no exit flap and going outside probably wasn't the smartest idea. Snow can oftentimes be a terrifying setting, especially at night. The snowflakes falling, creating a wall that limits your vision, the cold biting at your skin and soul. The worst part of it for me is the silence. One might think a quiet environment would allow you to hear an enemy or a threat nearby, but a little bit of science has shown me snowfall stops sound waves, making it hard to hear around you. And right now, the nearly 3 feet of snow outside of the tent and the constant rain of flakes outside made it hard for me and Isaac to hear each other across the small rectangular tent. Isaac! I heard that. The voice sounded far off in the distance, elongated, and it caught me off guard as it did Isaac himself. Boy, did he look startled. Turning to the tent wall behind him, lowering his gun, the guy went from my hardy partner in crime to looking like a deer in the headlights. Barely anything could be heard besides Isaac's heavy breathing as his eyes darted around. "Mom?" he cried out, his voice breaking. "Isaac!" The voice sounded again, less strained and more normal. Isaac quickly walked over to the tent window and pressed his eyes up to it. "Mom, it's me, Isaac!" "Isaac, get away from the window," I said calmly, wanting to make less noise than he was now. But Isaac continued to look outside. "Mom, is that you?" he said. His eyes seemed to zero in on something outside. "Isaac, get away from the window!" I shouted, but he couldn't hear me. He was too caught up in his own world, too caught up to avoid what happened next. "Isaac!" Cold, hard fear shot up my spine as I heard the voice, distorted and warped. The sound came from outside the tent wall, right behind me. My instincts kicked in as my body lurched forward, aiming my rifle at the wall, but before I could even fire a shot, Isaac screamed. He doesn't know what happened, mostly due to the nature of his injury, but Isaac fell back from the tent wall, clutching his eyes as blood started to pour from it. Panic set in as I quickly rushed over, yelling at him to let me see it. But Isaac kept his hand pressed up against it, which was probably a smart move. But we didn't have time to think about that. "Isaac!" A voice that sounded far too deep to be a human's voice. It was something straight out of the nightmare fever dreams that we had as a kid. It came from the other end of the tent. My eyes shot over as I saw the hole that I'd cut into the fabric start to rip open. Appendages of what looked like, well, from the glance that I got, a skeleton, but not really. It started to rip open the tent. I grabbed the knife that I'd used before, stabbing right into the fabric, cutting through, and started to tear right down through it. All the while, I could hear whatever it was on the other end of the tent continue to call out, "Isaac! Isaac! Come home!" As my knife reached the cold, hard dirt ground, I ripped Isaac off the ground, and I chucked him through the newly cut hole, not caring if there was snow or rain or void or whatever else was on the other side. Then I grabbed my rifle, seeing the thing had gotten a horrifying arm through as I threw myself into the exit as well. I felt myself go into freefall. My eyes shut as I felt cold air hit me, and I fell hard, face first, into the concrete floor of the basement. I shook my head as I bolted to my feet, grabbing my rifle, standing to see Isaac with his pea shooter ready, his blood all over it, his hand and his face, and we were both staring at one of the old paintings, an old painting half covered by one of the burlap sacks. I gazed over at Isaac, who gave me a look that said exactly what I was thinking. Walking over, I ripped the burlap off and tossed it to the side. The painting was a clearing in the middle of a snowy pine forest, snow falling heavily from the sky, as well as blanketing the ground around a small rectangular tent with a campfire outside. Around this point, I was just about done with whatever was going on, not even knowing how long we'd been down here. I eyed the area around us and saw the generator through the darkness, not 12 meters away. "Cover me," I ordered as Isaac held up his piece, his back to me as I logged in. As I hastily flipped each switch before powering back on the touchpad, I logged in and was ready to power the generator back on. Then I remembered the security camera. Every time a person logs in, the camera captures a still for security purposes to ensure that if anyone is tampering with the generator, we'll find out. I quickly tapped on the stored files icon and I started scrolling through, and what I saw should have been impossible. The only way to access the generator is by directly going up to the thing, logging in, and shutting it off. So, when all the login images, besides my mug showing up, showed an empty room, I shouldn't be surprised by anything at this point, but I was. "Are you done yet?" Isaac said. "I need to get some bandages on these cuts, man." Now wasn't the best time to start wild speculation, so I simply headed over to the diagnostics page and waited as the generator hummed back to life. All that greeted us was a calm noise at first, and then you could hear every device in the house power back on as the lights flickered back to life above us. And after tonight, I nearly chuckled out of pure joy. My celebration was cut off though, as Isaac fired off a few rounds from his piece, and the sound waves, well, I guess the area was so small around us, it sounded like a car exploding right next to us. As I stumbled forward into the wall, I plugged my ears and gazed back to see whatever Isaac was targeting, and all I saw was a gray concrete wall with 3 new smoldering craters in the side of it. I shook my head, hoping to alleviate the ringing in my ears as I marched right up to him. "Isaac, what are you shooting at?" His head shot up to look at me, and through the buzzing in my ear canals, all I could hear him say was, "What?" "What were you shooting at?" I yelled at him. "Why are you yelling?" he said. "Because you deafened me," I yelled. Isaac stuck one of his fingers to his ears, trying to, I guess, open it up more, somehow, as he said, "I saw a woman." "What?" I asked, a little less deaf and a lot more surprised. "A woman. Black hair, dead-looking skin," he said, as he shook his head. "She just appeared right as the lights came back on, and I don't know, she disappeared when I fired," Isaac said. I gazed over his shoulder, and then remembered the place he'd fired off those rounds corresponded with that little incident that I had had down here over a month ago. The situation soaked in as we headed upstairs. The security room showed no breaches had occurred, but the backup generator was nearly empty. We had been down there for around 3.5 hours. I told Isaac and John to get their stuff. It's occurred to me that the situation here is out of my expertise, so I'm following up with one of the leads that I had in town, an herbalist named Roseanne, who's apparently got a knack for the paranormal. If I and my small band of cabin dwellers are going to beat whatever's out there, we're going to need more than some guns and equipment. Anyway, I'll update you on how it goes. If not, well, you can just assume that I met a sudden death in the woods.